Well, thanks for popping into Wano's Photos and welcome to the video. And today's video is going to be about one buys and should you buy a one buy. And we're going to talk about, the pros and cons, and we're also going to talk about what application they should be used for. And we have Campagnolia that's just released a new one buy. So is this the new trend? Is this the new disc brakes in cycling? Well, we're all going to discuss that after roll intro. Well, the main premise that they like to sell these one buys by is that you have no front derailleur. So they're saying that you have no problems with your front derailleur out of adjustment, and the derailleur basically derailing and chain drop and all that sort of thing. And this has had a bit of a problem in the past. And I remember when SRAM first brought out their one buy, and they were the ones who really pushed it initially, and they actually stated, we'll never make another front derailleur again. I remember reading the article. But the reality is they have made another front derailleur. So really, it didn't take off like they expected, and people have still persisted after all these years with 2x. So why is it back in the media, and why is it now becoming a little bit more popular? Well, it could be marketing, it could be that they're better. So we're going to have a look at that. Well, let's look at the pros for such a system. Now, the first and obvious one is it's simpler. So we don't have any front derailleur, it doesn't have to be adjusted, there's one less cable, the STI up the top only has one lever and the other one's just a dummy one. So for someone who's probably new to cycling, there's none of this like, I've got to switch here and then I've got to change the front derailleur, I've got to change back. And a lot of people have a bit of problem with this for some time until they become, competent cyclists. So in this instance, that's a big pro. It's something someone can just jump on the bike and you just click the lever one way and you click the other lever the other way, and boom, boom, boom. You change up, you change down. It's a linear system, very, very simple. Now, the other thing that the premise that they sell by is there's no front derailleur. So if there's no front derailleur, you're not going to have this chain drop that you have with, changing from one ring to another ring at the front and out of adjustment and all the problems we've had in the past with front derailleurs. So they claim that it's a much simpler system, and the rear derailleur is a lot more accurate and doesn't give as much trouble. So you go to one buy system and it's going to be a trouble-free system. Okay, let's look at the cons. Now, the most obvious one is that you have to have a much bigger cassette on the back because you've only got one chain ring on the front, and you need to pick this chain ring that's halfway between your big chain ring that you would normally have and your little chain ring you would normally have. So it sort of sits, you've got to put it somewhere in the middle because you've got to try and get the best of both worlds. And then you're hoping that you can have a wide ratio cassette on the back to compensate for those two front rings that you haven't got anymore. And this really is where the whole system, to me, kind of starts to fall apart, because if you've got a 50-34 compact and you put like a 32 or a 34 as your biggest cog on the back, you've got a 1-to-1 ratio or almost 1-to-1 ratio. Now, if you go to a one buy system and you've got a 46 on the front, you have to have a 46 on the back, or a 44 or 42 to get close to those gears that you would have on your 2x. And then that means you need to have a much longer derailleur, and that actually could be a problem because the one by road may not come with such a long derailleur. So then you start to get into fitting cassettes on. And then if you even want to go to easier gears, like more than 1-to-1, then that's a really big issue because now you've got to run really big cassettes. But on a 2x, you can actually put smaller chain rings on the front, where Praxis, Wolf Tooth, and also Absolute Black offer these chain rings that can fit on the front to give you much easier gears. So to get the easier gears is a little bit more difficult on a one buy because you're chasing that derailleur chain length and your tooth measurement for your chain and your derailleur. So you need to have a massively long derailleur to even fit these cassettes on. That may not be possible. I haven't tried it, but I'd probably say that you would have difficulty doing that. The second con you have is, let's just say you manage to get the long derailleur and you get it all working and you've got your 5211 or your 5010 if it's a SRAM one, you put an XTR on the back. The other problem is that you're going to have bigger steps between the cogs, and you might go, well, so what? But once you start riding these, because I've tried these one buys, and when you start riding them, you start to really feel these steps are quite huge. And especially when you're riding into headwinds and you're trying to get that really nice cadence for your power output into the headwind, because it makes such a big difference. And you just seem to be clicking backwards and forwards from one gear to the other, and you just can't find that sweet spot. And this is one thing that I found that I really didn't like about the one-by systems. You do compromise your fine gear selection in the back. You actually have more cross chaining. You actually wouldn't think so. You know, this is something that is probably not intuitive to most people, but unless you're sort of in those center gears, if you go to easier gears, you're massively cross chaining, or if you go to your fastest gears, you're also massively cross chaining, because the front chain ring needs to be primarily about in the middle. Otherwise, you get quite a severe cross chaining on your bike. And you might think, yeah, well, so what? But you get a lot of chain noise, and what it does is it actually induces chain drop, especially if you just turn your pedals backwards. It just throws the chain straight off, and it drops down your cassette. So it's really right on the edge. And this is one thing that I didn't like. You know, you get this constant noise coming from your transmission. Yeah, and the other con that I found is when you're in the actual hardest gear, going the fastest, and you're in that little cog at the back, and the derailleur's got the least amount of tension on the chain has a bit of a tendency to fall off the cog and actually fall down between the cog and the frame. And of course, you know, once it falls in, it really jams, because you're going so fast, and it just jams up the whole pedal. And usually you're pedaling quite fast as well, because you've got a 46 or something on the front, and you've limited your top end. And it really jams in there hard, and it's really difficult to get out. You just have to drop the wheel out, and then it scratches all your frame. And that's a real con, and that really was a big annoyance for me. And I know other people that it happened to on their e-bikes, which have a one-by system as well. These group sets, you need to have special front rings. They're called wide, narrow front rings. And what it does is, if you look at a chain, you can see that there's a big hole and a little hole and a big hole and a little hole. So it actually fits in there a lot tighter, because the chain rings are not designed to derail like a normal 2x. But the problem is with them is that because the chains run at such extreme angles on your cassette on the back, that when they start to wear, you find your chains come off. So, you know, these can actually wear out quicker, I found, because they've got that extra force on them where you have a lot more cross chaining, and then you have to buy another one. And also the other problem is trying to find that sweet spot for the front chain ring. You know, is it 46? Is it 44? Is it a 48? And of course, you've got to go and buy these and change them out. In conclusion, let's just not, bash one speeds that much, because they do work, and they do work effectively. It's just that if you're someone who likes to go fairly quickly and also likes to climb a lot of hills, they do have a limited spread, and it's very hard to get the same ratio spread as a 2x. And this is why one of the reasons why I didn't like them. They work okay, and they're good if you don't do a lot of climbing. If you're on the flat land and you don't need to go to easy gears, like a TT or whatever, I mean, one-bys really work. And you could probably say they're a simpler system, and especially if your speed's consistent, like in a TT, and you stay around the middle of the cassette, so you're not cross-training and not losing watts from cross-training, they can really, really work. And they're also great for people who are just starting into cycling, because trying to explain the way you change your front and derailleur to a newbie, it just completely goes over their head. They just don't understand that you've got a front and rear derailleur, and when you change the front, that's like your cassette again, but in an easier sequence. And then when you go to the big ring, it's like your cassette again in a harder sequence. And they just don't get it, and they all get confused, and it takes them a long time to learn it. And so, yeah, that's my experience with one-bys. And you know, I just wanted to make this video because I didn't want people jumping into this new tech thinking that it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, and then get disappointed with it, because I don't think it's a replacement for a 2x system on road bikes. I think it's something to supplement, you know, these sort of gravel bikes and these sorts of bikes where it's a bit of a sort of a do everything kind of bike, and you want the simplicity of the drivetrain. So anyway, that's my take on it. And remember to hit that subscribe button if you like this sort of content on cycling, and ring that bell so you don't miss another video. Thanks for watching. Cheers.